So, Sir Orgrim the Lightbringer will soon become a reality, as it is evident that the lore really changed over the past 2 decades, and we are going to get possibly the most unholy combination ever, the orcish paladins. While this may not sound as weird right now, for all those that play the RTS games, this is pretty much blasphemy, as originally the paladin order was literally created with a single purpose: to battle the orcish invading horde. Now, this isn't my own speculation. Blizzard literally confirmed that they plan to remove all the race class restrictions at some point, and to eventually introduce and make possible all the combos, including the orcish paladins. Now, in Dragonflight, just in a few months, regular orcish priests are going to become a thing, which is obviously going to set up the orcish paladins to follow. However, how are they really going to explain them, and what even is a paladin? As right now we have torrent troll ones, and there is even a dreadlord out there. If you're looking for a new mouse, then check out SteelSeries Aerox. They've sent it to me about 2 months ago, and it is excellent. The Aerox is ultra lightweight with a quality sensor, good build, and I especially like the wireless one, as it has a battery life of over 180 hours, and you can also wire it and use it as a regular mouse. Aerox 5 is one of the most versatile mice on the market, with 5 side buttons, and you can use it for pretty much any game. Although if you're really into hardcore MMORPGs, especially PvP, then Aerox 9 might be the best option. There's also the SteelSeries GG app, where you can customize your hardware, lighting, macros, and even record gameplay with GG moments at the click of a button. So check out SteelSeries Aerox and get your own mouse with my link below. Paladins are a class that have really changed over the years, and when I say really changed, I mean really changed. It isn't even the paladins themselves, but it is the fact that the lore of the light as a force just changed drastically. Originally, the paladins were actually a pretty simple concept and were a human thing only, just an elite order of believers. During the terrible orcish invasions, the light priests proved to be just way too fragile against the orcs, despite their very strong faith in the light. So the humans decided to create the paladins, which was a mix between a warrior and a priest, essentially imbuing really powerful warriors with the zealousness of priests. Although ultimately the paladins were actually a bit more fanatical, it was to be a perfect blend of a light enhanced warrior that ultimately saved humanity from the orcish invasion. However, a really long time passed since Warcraft 2. In Warcraft 3 and early on in World of Warcraft Classic, this lore was still kind of the case, and we had the Knights of the Silver Hand and the Argent Dawn, which were essentially just the paladins, and that was all there was to them. But then TBC came out, and Blizzard started slowly but surely, and not even that slowly, drastically shifting the lore. First off, we got Blood Elven Paladins, which turned out to not actually be paladins at all, but Blood Knights, and it turned out these guys were not actually light fanatics or had churches and institutions and their strong faith, and these guys literally just captured the Naru and started siphoning their power and just forcing it to use them, and it was literally everything the paladins were against. Now, an even bigger change were the Draenei Paladins, known as Vindicators, even though it might not seem like that on first glance. This was a massive one. While the Draenei were very much like the humans in their fate and just the way they work overall, it just gave an entirely new depth to light as a cosmological force. Previously, the light was this mysterious sort of philosophical thing. There were churches, institutions, and those that prayed and really deep down believed they were empowered, but boom, the Draenei marched in and pretty much just showed humans how shallow their entire philosophy actually is. These guys have been paladins back when the humans were a Titanforged vehicle, and they literally traveled with the Naru and had direct contact with the actual beings of the light. We also, at this point, started learning that light is a cosmological force that just has its own agenda, so really, the human churches are kind of hilarious when compared to the fact that the Draenei were literally just chilling out with what humans believe to be gods. However, this was literally just the start of it, as Blizzard decided to just go on full steam with these changes, and over time this just entire storyline became even more vague and even more diluted. Another big milestone was when they introduced the Tauren Sunwalkers, aka the Tauren Paladins, aka literally just druids of the sun. This, if you remember, was a really big shock back in the day, as the Tauren were always about nature, the Earth Mother, and yada yada, but then they started wielding the light. Well, Blizzard explained this as them worshipping the sun being related to the Earth Mother, and while they were essentially the same class in the game, it was a very different thing in the lore. Nonetheless, this has always been vague, and I can't really say Blizzard did a really good job to make this make a lot of sense. Well, now, with this change, things started becoming even crazier. Chronicle came out, and it really cleared out a lot of things about the light, but then Legion came out, and we started realizing, hey, maybe this light thing isn't actually as benevolent and as great of a force as we used to believe. The big Naru Zera literally tried to enslave Illidan to become a vessel of her agenda, and we helped out these Draenei back on alternate Draenor, but then they started turning Draenor into a Light Crusader base, and they just started forcing down this cosmological force on other people. So who knows, maybe these light guys are not actually as good as we used to previously believe. Now, as ridiculous as all this got, it got even more ridiculous. We have encountered Twilight Hammer Vindicators, which are literally the opposite of a paladin as you would imagine them to traditionally be, and these guys were literally paladins. Then we uncovered a Netricine that decided to convert himself into a being of the light and to literally become a paladin, although as we have learned recently in Shadowlands, it is more than likely that he's still serving the Nathrius and is just on a mission, a really deep undercover mission. But then we literally got Zandalari Paladins, which was kinda peak ridiculousness as their culture is just non-related to both the humans and the Draenei and the, you know, the traditional Paladin races. However, this was explained as them worshipping the Loa Rezan, and once again, just like the Tauren, they were their own thing, despite technically being the same class. Now, this brings us to the point of this video and the introduction of Orcish Paladins, and the reason I told you all this is, well, the title may sound ridiculous on first glance, and it really is super crazy. If the last time you played WoW was Classic, with all the new lore, this actually kinda sounds reasonable, as crazy as that sounds. As I just covered with the previous point, the lore of the Light and the Paladins really changed over the years. Like, it is literally a completely different thing than it used to be. There is pretty much a 180-degree turn from the tiny order of elite light warriors that really believed in the light to where we currently are at this point. Now, if you keep it followed what has been going on lately, you might have realized that we actually have Orcish priests. We've had the alternate Mega Orcish priests for a while now, and Blizzard recently confirmed that they will be adding regular main universe Orcish priests in Dragonflight, which means that this is going to be a new order of sorts. But how is this going to be explained, and how will this make any sense? Well, for the Mega Orcs, it is perfectly reasonable. They were added a few years back, and it all kinda makes sense. I'm not going to give you a detailed lore lesson, but essentially, since we've left alternate Draenor a few years ago, a lot of crazy things happen back there as time passes differently. But to sum it up, Yirel took over, the light got super crazy and just started force converting everyone, which caused a massive war. Now, Orcish priests sort of existed with the Shadowmoon clan, but they were more shadow priests, and it is said that some orcs took on the light without this fanatical aspect, while some were force converted and they kind of became the enemies of the Mega. So yeah, we've brought in the Mega Orcs from a light infested planet, and some priests came along. Keep in mind, the orcs on this planet literally saw the light in the exact same way they saw Fel magic and outsider force that came to their home to convert them. So this is a drastically different perspective than the Paladins you know of, and the light is this force of just benevolence and good. Now, most importantly, Blizzard about a month ago confirmed that we will be getting Orcish priests. Like, this is literally going to happen in a few months when Dragonflight is out. They didn't really explain them at this point, but the way I see it, it is more than likely going to be related to our travel to Argus a few years ago, and back when we spent a lot of time with the Army of the Light. At this point, all the races were exposed to the direct source, and the Hand of the Light is a cosmological force known as the Grand Army, so it is entirely possible that they kinda just fell in love with it during the time they were close to it. This happened a few years ago, so it is reasonable that some could become disciples at this point, or in the expansion after Dragonflight is gonna be a few years for this to make sense. Now, this in itself brings us to the topic of this video. If we are getting Orcish priests in Dragonflight, literally, how are Orcish Paladins going to be any different? Like, what is the actual lore difference that separates them? In fact, I kinda think the orcs would actually make more sense as Paladins than they would as priests, as orcs are a warrior society. They are on average really well versed in melee combat, and they have the physical strength to back it up. The point I made throughout this whole video is that the idea of Paladins being this sacred order is pretty much completely debunked and obsolete at this point, and at the moment it is super vague, which is actually kind of a common problem with Warcraft lore in general. I think if we asked Blizzard what is the difference between a Paladin and a priest at this point, they wouldn't really know how to give you a straight answer. With the current consensus, I think the safest bet is that the priests are literally just spellcasters, while the Paladins are warriors, and those proves that they're priests, but also utilize physical strength. Previously, we believed that the zealousness aspect was what separates them, but I don't really see how that is relevant at this point in time. So with all these changes, orcish paladins are really not that big of a deal, and once we learn what is the lore explanation going to be for orcish priests in Dragonflight, they could literally just extend that to the paladins and no one would bat an eye. They barely have to set up any additional groundwork. Now, despite all this making sense, I can't help but get this sort of feeling of unease with Orgrim the Lightbringer or Sir Garrosh the Ashbringer, but they will be coming soon, and it is pretty obvious that more than likely the relationship will be more related to the Grand Army of the Light more than anything else. So these orcish paladins are going to be more similar to the Draenei or the Lightbound Draenei paladins than the human order of the Silver Hand that all of you kinda traditionally relate paladins with. Thank you for watching. Check out how will undead paladins make sense by clicking on the screen, and check out the Academy for videos on real world history. See you next time.